Okay.
Glenn, I'll come to you at the very end. Unless you want to start at the top, Glenn.
No, I think you got a full desk here. Garrett, I'll let you go.
All right, sounds good. Glenn, if you turn off your video, and then I'll cue you up. You'll hear me say, "Now I want to introduce Glenn McDermott." Pop your video back on.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to for me to hit broadcast?
Yep. Good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce and Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. We'll be getting started with our program in just a moment. We'll let everyone get into the webinar and then we'll get going. Today, we're talking remote working and cybersecurity, of course, presented by Comcast Business and our Tech Council. We'll get started in just a moment. Again, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We're excited today to talk about remote working and cybersecurity. As you can probably see, all of our participants, or most of them, are at their homes, and we know many of you are too, as we continue to go through the COVID pandemic. And that has put an additional strain on working from home and the technology that we use to be able to do that. Today, our Tech Council, presented by Comcast Business, is providing our webinar. We want to thank all of our sponsors who also help us put these programs together. United Illuminating, and to make, if you can keep moving the slides, United Illuminating, Southern Connecticut Gas, and Connecticut Natural Gas that support our programming that we put together. Also, all of our investors as well that support the Chamber that have allowed us to continue to put on programming. And our streaming partners, these are the other chambers that you see here that have been broadcasting our webinars that we put on throughout the pandemic. As I mentioned, we do have a lot of investors in the Chamber. And as we've gone through this difficult time, these organizations have been able to support us and allow us to continue to put on programming like this. So we're excited about today's panel. We have a great panel. And again, I want to thank our Technology Council. They meet monthly. They put on informative sessions for our councils and conversation, and also for these webinars. We'll talk to Glenn McDermott a little bit later at the end of our program, and also offer opportunities for folks to get involved with the Technology Council. Today's program, as I mentioned, we're talking about remote work. We have a great panel. Our agenda today is we'll hear from each of our panelists for a few moments. Some of them have slides that they will present. And then after that, we'll take your questions. So you can put your questions into the chat box. Once we get into the Q&A portion of the program, I'll start pulling those up and moderating with all of our guests on our panel today. So I want to start first with Jason Goldfarb. He is with Technology Revealed and a senior consultant there. Jason, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Garrett. Thank you very much for having me.
What are some of the topics right now that you're most concerned with as we deal with this issue?
So, I mean, obviously with what's going on with COVID, you know, and the ability of businesses to stay up and running, remote work has been a critical component of trying to get the systems continuing to perform. We see a lot of issues with performance, with speed, with disconnects. We see people who are basically just not being able to be as productive as they need to be. And so we're working really hard on trying to manage our clients, their internet connectivity, their remote systems. A lot of people ended up having to work with equipment that they had at home, you know, that is not really intended to do what a business piece of hardware is supposed to do. So we're working on trying to resolve that for our clients as the needs arise. Cybersecurity wise, obviously everything is changing on a daily basis. People are becoming more and more sophisticated with their phishing scams and with ransomware. that's a never-ending battle to try to stay on top of that. And we partner with Sophos as a provider to maintain our clients. There are plenty of providers out there who provide those types of services. So we just try to stay on top of that.
Great. I know you had some slides you wanted to go through
Yeah.
quickly before we get started.
Sure, let me present those for you guys. Okay. Great, everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Let me just get into the presentation mode here. There we go. Okay, so we are looking at remote work and cybersecurity. This is me. A little bit about me. I've been doing this work since 1991. I've been with Technology Revealed since 2001. So, almost 20 years now, which is it's a great place to be. We've been supporting clients in Connecticut, Westchester County, and New York City on Macintosh specific solutions for years. We also do networking, wireless, all kinds of stuff. So if there's any questions after this, you guys can contact me at these contact details, and I'll be happy to talk further about anything that we discuss on the presentation. All right, so we did touch on the difficult shift to remote work. Unfortunately, with COVID, there was very little time for planning. A lot of people just kind of did stuff by the seat of their pants. Sometimes there were solutions that worked from home for some companies, but certainly not in the volume that they were forced to manage. In addition, with a very, very compressed timeline to get solutions up and running, and potentially unimproved corporate infrastructure. You've got a company that might have 100 megabit cable internet, and for the majority of their access for their users, that's fine. But when all of a sudden they've got 30 people working from home, that's not really an appropriate solution anymore. The challenges that we're seeing in the field, there's the reliance on employee-owned hardware. Very few companies were able to send their corporate computers back to their employees, so that they're utilizing different solutions across the spectrum of hardware, which opens up problems with cybersecurity, viruses. How do you extend that internet envelope out to other people in their homes? The security, and also enhancing telecommunications. How do you manage telephone access for corporate employees who aren't in the office? That, coupled with the access performance issues, really kind of underscore the challenges that businesses have been experiencing. So I'm going to touch, there's a lot of things to talk about. I'm really going to just basically touch on a couple of things here for people who may not be technically proficient. Maybe they're business owners who have IT staff, or who just kind of have been making things work. So a couple of definitions. Obviously, your firewall, your router, they provide the primary security at the edge of your network. They stop malicious traffic from entering into your network. They also keep all of your local traffic local, so that only traffic that's designed to go out to the web, for example, leaves your network. They can provide additional security as well. Services, so for example, Stateful Packet Inspection, SPI, which looks at every single packet that comes in and makes a determination as to whether it's safe traffic, it's not safe traffic, it's replying to an inbound request, things of that nature. A lot of firewalls can provide VPN services to allow a secure encrypted tunnel from the workstation that's remote into the office, and provide that seamless kind of integration into networking. They can provide IPS and IDS solutions to check for people who are attempting to break that firewall. Some systems can simply detect and notify, or some can actively prevent them. Some router solutions have antivirus and anti-malware built right in, so that they can keep your network safe right at the edge. And some of them also provide content monitoring and content blocking, so that you can make sure that your employees aren't doing things that would compromise your business. In terms of connection methods, there's a bunch of different ways that your remote users can log into your network, and they all come with different pros and cons. VPN is kind of the standard model that everybody looks at as their first line. That basically takes a client in the remote machine and a server at the office, connects the two across the internet via an encrypted tunnel, and gives the end user an in-office presence. So they have access to servers and printers and everything they would have as if they were in the office. Drawbacks to that is there is overhead for the encryption, and it is potentially slow. Plus, if you have a poor network connection at your remote location, you could drop a lot. And then if you're dropping, you're going to lose connectivity to the services that you're relying on. Another option is remote desktop software, RDS. That allows an end user at their home to remote into a workstation or a virtual system in the office, and then remotely control that machine. You have a lot more control over that now because the client is managing a machine that you have in your office. Access is now at wire speed, and all of the systems that you use to maintain system integrity, your antivirus, your anti-malware, your patching, that all happens at the remote machine, and you're simply managing that computer from a remote location. VDI is similar, where that would be something like a Citrix environment, where you are hosting multiple virtual desktops for your employees to log into off of one server instead of having them directly connect to a computer that they may have on their desk, for example. And then one of the newest things that we're looking at is the software-defined networking. It's very interesting. We've just started playing with it, and it literally creates a real virtual network through the internet that doesn't require any services. It's peer-to-peer encrypted communication. It's exciting. It's interesting. We're just getting onto the bandwagon with that, and we're still doing some exploration. So it's pretty cool. Pros and cons of most of these are going to be the same. VPN is relatively complex to set up. So is VDI. It requires maintenance. It requires management. Security is probably tightest with things like VDI, RDS, because you are able to manage the endpoint inside your office. Costs, software-defined networking is very inexpensive. It's actually free for the first 100 nodes. Remote desktop software can be as low as $4 or $5 per client per month. VPN is costly on the inception side, but once you own it, you own it. And VDI requires services like servers and licenses and things of that nature. So there's always that cost to consider. A lot of these solutions like VPN and VDI are going to require support staff as well, simply because depending on the size of your infrastructure, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be connecting. And if there are any incidents or issues that are occurring with those connections, you're going to have people who are answering the phone. So if you do need to upgrade your systems, because again, maybe you only have 100 or 200 megabit internet, what you should really be doing is thinking critically and asking questions. Engage your workforce to find out where their problems really are. You should be budgeting for realistic upgrades. You know, don't think that you're going to be able to solve moving 40 or 50 people off site for $2,000 a year. You should be planning for support and maintenance on all of this equipment as part of your budget, because just setting it up and walking away from it's not realistic. And if you don't feel that you have the in-house expertise, you know, bring in experts where necessary. That's going to be an upfront cost, but it's going to save you thousands of dollars on the back end. Be sure to plan for implementation coordination. You know, how am I going to get all these people to talk to each other in a timely enough fashion to make this project, you know, hit its timeline? Test, always test. And when you're done testing, test again. Make sure you're scheduling downtime with your employees so that they understand that if you're going to be making a major upgrade, you know, it may or may not affect their timelines. And don't forget to budget in time for end user training and IT training, because if you're adding this to your IT team, this is a new thing for them potentially as well. So they have to have the time to make sure that they're doing this properly. So for best practices, we only have one more slide when this is done, so I'm just kind of zip through this. Document your policies. Documentation is critical for any small business. Require sign off on an AUP or an acceptable use policy for your home users who are now working remotely. You don't want to expose your business to things simply because you have people who are utilizing their internet connection for things they shouldn't be. Educate your employees on cybersecurity issues. Don't assume that people just know what is a bad email or a website they shouldn't visit. Test your workforce regularly. There are sites like KnowBe4 that you can send out sample spam emails, and then they will report back on how many people have opened them, and you can focus on the sections of your business employees that are not as aware of security issues as they should be. Definitely enforce password policies and practices. Make sure your password strength and complexity is good. Longer is better. You want a high entropy password. You want to make sure that you're rotating those passwords on a regular basis. Install antivirus and anti-malware solutions if you don't have them in your system already. And don't go necessarily just with the home version of Sophos or Avast. Use a centrally managed console, and that way you can verify compliance for your clients. Use multi-factor authentication whenever possible. And if it's difficult for your end users, they can use their cell phones. Obviously, that's part of MFA, but they can also use an authenticator application, which are available from Facebook and from Google and from Microsoft. That really kind of helps to kind of keep all of their things in one place for their MFA. Back up all of your critical data. There are plenty of good backup structures to follow. There's 322, 323. Make sure that backing up your data, although really, really critical, the one thing people tend to fail to do with their backups is to ensure their backup integrity, because they don't test their restoration on a regular basis. So your backup is only as good as what you can restore. And if you're not testing your restoration, then your backup is really not as good as it can be. Make sure all your devices are fully patched and well maintained. Patch management systems like Alert, which we provide to our clients, keep machines up to date. They monitor for health and compliance. You'll know what's breaking on your computers potentially if they're monitored before they break and cause you an issue. And patches obviously keep systems secure and up to date. And then if you're in a position where you have a mobile workforce, you really should be looking very strongly at encrypting your workstations and your mobile devices. You can leverage an MDM to monitor and maintain mobile compliance and even compliance with your laptops at this point. I know it's a ton of stuff that we just ripped through. If there's more you want to talk about, you can contact me for a one-on-one at any point, and I'd be happy to discuss any of the things that we talked about or any other issues that you may have. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Garrett.
Great, thanks, Jason. And we'll get more into the topics as we go through. I want to introduce now Chris Wisniewski. Chris is a manager, IT security and assurance services with Whittlesey. And Whittlesey, many know as an accounting firm, but I know one of the key components you guys try to do is minimize risk. And Chris, obviously, there's a lot of risk out there in the cybersecurity world, especially now with so many people working from home.
Yeah, so good morning. Thank you, Garrett. Appreciate that. I'm just going to talk a little bit kind of on a few topics that really, I'd say are kind of the hot buttons, really what every business should be looking at right now. Realistically, one of the things that we talk about at Whittlesey, as Garrett alluded to, is yes, we are a financial advisory firm, but we have a full MSP, so we're a managed service provider for full IT for a couple hundred clients all over the state and also up in Massachusetts, and we're in 38 different states. We have a presence with clients. So we do a lot of IT support. We do a lot of cybersecurity. That's the firm that I came over about 2 years now to kind of build up a little bit and enhance. So we have a strong team, a lot of experts, and we do a lot of cybersecurity assessments and IT audits to really rate that risk and get a cybersecurity rating, help with the remediation. And one of the biggest things we've been doing is breach response. So, thinking about the last 3-4 months, really what we've seen is just a vast increase in breaches. And some weeks we have 4 or 5, and they're just coming from all over the place that we're assisting. And really, the main cause of those, these hackers, the main vector comes down to phishing. It's mainly through a phishing email. They're more sophisticated. They're crafted differently now. It's not, the prince coming over saying you got $5 million if you reply to my email with horrible grammar in there. I think we're all attuned to the fact that we can pick up on those. The increase just during the COVID pandemic, we're talking a 350% increase in phishing attacks on businesses in the United States alone, just because of the hypersensitivity. So yes, healthcare is a target, but it's all industries. It's education, it's municipalities. Nonprofits are a very big target right now. So we're running into breaches are really increasing, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more to why, and that's the whole phishing. So people at home, probably a little more distracted. Maybe they're doing things on their phone as opposed to if they're sitting in an office on their computer, maybe paying a little less attention, or you get out of your routine a little bit and you become a little bit more lackadaisical. You start opening emails, you're not paying attention. People aren't sure how this whole remote thing works, especially back in March and April. And so, oh my gosh, there's an email from the CEO. It must be to me. I must open it. So, people aren't stopping and thinking and taking those simple steps of, I really should evaluate this email because I'm pretty sure that my CEO doesn't normally ask me to buy 25 Amazon gift cards for $2,000. But we're seeing an increase in those, specifically to COVID related, right? So anybody's going to open anything, they'll craft these emails so it looks like it comes from your HR department or somebody in compliance, somebody that's kind of driving that to the employee base saying, here's our new policy, we need you to update something, or, here's a new plan. And what they're doing is again, being sophisticated so that people, they fall for it pretty easily, but hackers aren't going to rest at a pandemic. They're going to take advantage of it. So, one of the biggest things we can do against the phishing, and I can't preach it enough, is security awareness. We've got to educate. You've got to educate your employees. We've got to keep them up to date on what the new phishing schemes are, how to work, as Jason said, there's plenty of ways of how do you work remotely in a safe manner, right? Are our laptops encrypted? Are we sending email? It's a lot harder now to share information when we get into protected health information or personally identifiable information, because it's not the same. Everybody has to get on that VPN. It's slower. It takes forever to download or upload a file to the network. Let me just email it over to Sherwin. That's a quick, easy way. Well, now you're taking that data and exposing it, and it's not encrypted, which violates a lot of the regulations. And so we're finding that, ongoing education for the employees, making sure they understand your policies. You have a written information security program that outlines all the, acceptable use for how to use email, how to use your internet, and how to share things and data classification. But if nobody has been reminded or looked at it, in the last 3 years, no one's going to remember how to do this. So it's really critical that we make sure that we share that, educate your employees, make sure they're aware, make sure they're taking modules. There's different vendors out there that can help in this. There's like a KnowBe4 is a great product. There's plenty of others, but do phishing campaigns for your employees. Send phishing campaigns out. See who your susceptible folks are. You'll get statistics right away. You'll find out who opened them, who reported them and didn't open them, who clicked on the link in the email, so that you can provide remediation and training to those people. It's really critical that we're educating our staff. And again, if we let it go and become a little bit lackadaisical, it's only, going to open each company and business up to risk. Because all it takes is one. It only takes one person. We've dealt with quite a few breaches, and some of them are extremely large in number of affected parties. I can just say that. And what's going to happen is it's only going to grow and increase. So, Security awareness is critical with ensuring your folks understand your policies and procedures. They understand how to share information securely, what the protocols are, what they shouldn't be doing, or what's violating company policy. Doing those ongoing phishing campaign, once a year, twice a year, not enough. Once a month, that's better. I would even say more frequent, twice a month. But crafting these so that the folks are becoming more and more aware and vigilant is only going to, lower that cyber risk rating at the end of the day. And, I'll leave it, that's kind of a general high level overview, because I know I want to leave it open for Q&A as we move on. So I'll turn it back over to you here.
Great, thanks, Chris, appreciate it. Now I want to bring in Cheryl DeMarco. Cheryl is with the Connecticut Procurement and Technical Assistance Center. And Cheryl, I know that your organization works with a lot of businesses that are getting into the federal pipeline, trying to secure defense contracts, things like that. And to be able to even compete in that area, they need to be up to speed on the protections and different security levels for their cybersecurity themselves.
Yes, actually. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl DeMarco. I'm with Connecticut PTAC. We're the Procurement Technical Assistance Center here in Connecticut. And we're funded by the federal and state government. I'll start my video. That must be share screens, right? I'm used to GoToMeeting. I'm sorry.
No problem at all. No problem.
Is that what that is? Yeah, right. Share screen.
If you, yeah, the video, and then share screen, you can throw up your PowerPoint.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. So we'll get it and start your video. Well, I'm better at cybersecurity than I am Zoom. So there we go. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, procurement specialist with Connecticut PTAC. We're federal and state funded. What we do is we're a free resource for small businesses in Connecticut. And we help you walk through the steps of CMMC, which is Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, which is with the federal government. It's coming down the pipeline through Department of Defense. Level 1 and 2 is probably what you're already doing, and a lot of it was already covered so far. This is a form or template that you can use to sort of track what you've already done. And there's a website there that's part of the federal government. This is a little more wordy, FAR clause. This is the federal government's requirement for level 1 of CMMC. This is what we all have already covered. So I'll put it in layman's terms a little bit, which might sound a little repetitive, but it's good that you all know. So if we want to translate the CMMC reference, we'll go to making sure everyone uses their own not easily guessed passwords to log into their own accounts, own emails. There's a lot of sharing emails, and that's frowned upon according to cybersecurity. So non-IT employees should be users, not administrators. Basically, they can't make changes to the computer. Make sure your home and business are on separate networks. No, coffee shops are great, but keep your business out of their Wi-Fi, just in case they're hacked. Make sure cloud storages are not shared. Never post sensitive information. You're excited you want a contract with the Air Force. Don't post it on Twitter, anything. Just keep it on the down low and fulfill the contract. Don't allow password sharing, of course. That's repeated. Keep passwords on all computers and make sure all company cell phones have a PIN to unlock. There's actually a situation where I was in a restaurant and an FBI agent's badge and cell phone were left behind. Fortunately, he did have a password or PIN in the badge he, of course, came back for. But just, everything happens. We're all human. You just never know. So keep a PIN on your cell phone, especially. I don't like it. I always forget it, but we have to do it. Destroy all your data. No going to the recycling center and just leaving the computer, unplugging it and bringing it. Really make sure you get an IT expert to clean it. There are some things that can be covered or recovered that you and I, or average person, would not know how to do, but hackers do. Keep all computers away from public areas, behind locked doors preferably, but definitely not at the entrance where I can just walk in and, you know, mess with your keyboard while you're at lunch or anything. Escort even utility workers and delivery personnel to where they need to be or take a package from them. Just don't let anyone wander around. A lot of this is covered in Sarbanes-Oxley Act, but just as a reminder, use a sign-in, sign-out sheet, preferably save it for 7 years. Just, you never know what could happen down the pipeline, and you'll have an idea of who was in the office when something did happen. Restrict how many people can lock and unlock your company doors. Of course, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So use a web hosting company to host your website if at all possible. Make sure your computers all have a firewall. If guests are to use your Wi-Fi, you can do a guest account and have them log into that. That way you keep yours separate. Always make sure you let the computer, router, and printers update to the latest available software. It is annoying. I find myself up until creating this webinar, canceling them out and delaying them. Then I got to this point and it was, oops. So make sure you get those done. Updated virus protection, run the virus anti-software or antivirus software, even if it's once a week as a repetition. So you get into cleaning out your everything, making sure it's all nice and fresh. Don't ignore the antivirus scans either, and definitely pay for the software. I believe a lot of our cable, I know Comcast, Cox, they do have their own antivirus software as part of your plan. So that may be the case, so you're not exactly paying extra. And then level 1 of cybersecurity decoded. So it is ad hoc. There's no formal certification for it, but there is a checklist. And of course, every small business may need to do this with a professional outside of their own company, just for an outside looking in perspective, or you could do it yourself. It's really a personal preference. And this is just an example of a form that you could use to keep track of your processes and what you've done, how it's going, etc. Level 2 CMMC does get much more in depth. So that's something that it's like a segue into the formal certification of the federal government, which is level 3. I won't go into the 113 pages here, but we certainly can if you need one-on-one guidance. So this, of course, being decoded is access control. Who has access? Did you train everyone about cybersecurity? Do you know who's accessing your computers? Are you managing and auditing controlled information? So let's assume you're hacked. The federal government comes into your office and says, everyone, put up your hands, your computers are ours. What are you going to do? That is a very real scenario. It's happened repeatedly, and it's actually the reason the federal government has this formal certification coming up. And then also some general terminology for level 2 is how are your processes maintained? Do you have spreadsheets on the processes, backups? What do you do with retired equipment? Who can access your spreadsheets? Is your staff trained to deal with threats? What would they do if there was one? Have you done a risk assessment worst case scenario, like the situation I gave you, where if someone comes in and says, give me all your computers, what do you do in that sense? If you're not working with the federal government on a contract, I would vet who's asking you to hand over everything first, but another assessment is how do you verify the security procedures that are in place? Do a test. Maybe, third party comes in and they play hacker. Are your communication channels secure? Is the process to address new vulnerabilities or system down situations defined? You have a clear definition of what would take place. So level 2 is worst case scenario documented, basically. And then here's a little bit about our upcoming webinars. We have more detail and training videos. And there's my email address, cdemarco@sector.org. This is a very conversation, and I know so many questions are out there. So if you do have any, you can reach out.
A great job plowing through a lot of dense material and a lot of slides and getting through it really quickly.
I know.
And we'll, yeah, definitely. And we'll, you know, if people have questions, put them in the chat in the Q&A. I know we have a few out there right now, and so we'll get to those in a moment. But first, I want to introduce Sherwin Yoder. And Sherwin is a partner with Carmody, Torrance, Sandeck, Hennessy. And Sherwin is going to talk us through the legal side. We've talked all the technicalities and the things that you should be doing. Sherwin comes in, unfortunately, a lot of times when things have gone wrong, and the cleanup, I guess I could say, Sherwin. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. Thanks to my fellow panelists. It's great to hear your comments. It's a great panel. You're getting, the audience is getting a wide view of the risks that you're exposed to. So Carmody, of course, is a Connecticut-based firm. I just will tell you a brief word about that. We have 3 offices in Stamford, Waterbury, and New Haven. I'm in New Haven. I bounce between Waterbury and New Haven. And then we have a co-working office in Hartford where we support a number of insurtech and fintech related startups, some health tech startups, and that's part of my practice as well. So my background is IP litigation, patents, trademarks, software, copyright issues, trade secrets, you know, business torts, and that ended me, put me where I am today, dealing with cybersecurity and data privacy. And as Garrett mentioned, I am called upon to coach businesses through a breach response when the bad thing happens, and they might have to report the breach or assess whether or not they have a reportable breach under whatever regulation they're responding to. But I also do front end work, and I much prefer to do that, like my colleagues here on this panel, trying to get clients up to speed on things that they can do both practically, I'm not a technician, but legally, how to button down your risk. And so I thought it would be good. I'll just take a few minutes so we can get to those questions. I thought it would be good just to zoom out a little bit and identify the landscape of the legal risks that are behind these threats, and what might happen if you don't do some of the things that the experts here on this panel are recommending that you do. So originally, you know, privacy in this country and concerns about data were focused on confidential information or proprietary information, probably for most businesses, you know, guarding the crown jewels and trade secrets, the Colonel's recipe, et cetera. But more and more regulators have made businesses be concerned about personal information of their clients and customers and of the general public that submits their data to those companies. And so now you have 50 different breach notification laws, one for each state, and that's targeting financial information. Of course, you've got HIPAA with healthcare information. You've got the Graham-Leach-Bliley laws that have been filtered through various regulations through banking commissioners and insurance commissioners, and require some of those disclosures that we see in our bank statements and their websites. Of course, you have student data privacy issues, FERPA, the Federal Education Rights Program, protecting student data and educational data. So we have these sort of silos of data that are protected. And that's how it's been for a while. But the trend now, and this is, I think, what I would like the audience to focus on, is the trend is much broader now. So the definition of what's personal and what should be protected has really expanded. And Europe is leading the way with the so-called GDPR and their privacy regulation. And California is now bringing GDPR-like comprehensiveness to the states. And other states are watching. And Connecticut had a copycat bill on the California Consumer Privacy Act as early as last year. And again, this legislative session, but that's been thankfully transformed into a task force or a study bill. So it's coming. The definition of what you have to protect, and therefore the exposure that we have as in our businesses and in our data systems, which are now being accessed from home is just growing. It's something to be sensitive to, and so really pay attention and start working into your budgets, cybersecurity and data privacy. I talked about those state breach notification laws, some of the siloed laws, so to speak, and now these sort of expansive laws. There are other laws that I would put in the category of expansive laws that are not only saying, now this information is protected, but here are the things that you need to do to protect it. And you have state insurance laws, and state insurance, health insurance businesses now have to do annual attestations about their cybersecurity position, and have they done their annual cybersecurity assessment. If you're a business that has Massachusetts residence data, under their laws, you have to have written information security programs. And there are these growing number of states, including certain regulated businesses here in Connecticut, that require now that you do something about it with your cybersecurity. You have assessments and you write programs and policies and procedures. You do the training and awareness. It's no longer a best practice. And now, as you heard just now from Cheryl, that's also a trend, is they're requiring sort of independent certifications. It's not, right now, they're focused, the Cmmc, or the Cybersecurity Manufacturing Model certification, focuses on manufacturers in the defense supply chain, but you can see that coming in other industries as well, where there's going to be a certain type of audit and assessment and certification. So that's not to bring doom and gloom, but just to sensitize our businesses here in Connecticut to what's coming down the pike. As far as remote working, some of the concerns that I see include employee theft, which was already mentioned here briefly. They have concerns, employers have concerns about losing intellectual property and trade secrets, customer lists and stuff like that. But I've had cases where the employer has a rogue employee who sends themselves emails with lists of things that they want to protect. And now those lists also contain personal information or customer information that could be protected health information or social security numbers. Or so now not only do they have their competitive information out and about in the wild, so to speak, but they've also got a privacy breach that they might have to report to a regulator. So those are the things that can be real headaches for employers. So when you hear about monitoring, when you hear suggestions from Jason and Chris, Cheryl, the other panelists, about things you can do to button down those risks, really pay attention to that. The acceptable use policies, for example, and having the employees sign off on that. That isn't just a best practice. It's probably going to be necessary for you to manage your legal risk, increase training, practicing incident response. We didn't mention cyber insurance, and maybe I should mention that because just the process of doing cybersecurity or cyber insurance or getting that coverage will help highlight to you or do some self-assessment your cybersecurity posture, and can highlight the areas that you need to button down. But be aware that don't just buy whatever your decades-old broker recommends. You want to engage with a broker who has real cybersecurity coverage experience. There hasn't been a whole lot of claims relative to other insurance products, so you really want to make sure whoever you're talking to understands what's your particular risk profile, what's your business, what kinds of data you touch, what your employees are doing with that data inside or outside the office, in order to buy the right kind of coverage, because most of it is a la carte, and you don't want to buy something that you don't need. It is relatively cheap though these days at this point. Be mindful of the recommendation to encrypt. I think I'll just close with that admonition, because that's not just a best practice. That's actually written into some of the breach notification laws. So for example, if a client calls me and says, sure, you don't believe this, my numbskull employee, they left their laptop in the back seat of their car and it got broken into at Stop and Shop or whatever it is. And I can ask, did you have full disk encryption? Was the password stuck on a sticky note that was stuck to the laptop? If not, and you did the encryption properly, the device is properly encrypted, that's technically not a breach. There's no potential for a breach there unless the encryption was done improperly or they disclosed their password. So encryption is being required in states like Massachusetts and Connecticut, where you have personal information of residents of those states. So I'll just close with that, Garrett, and hopefully we'll have more time to address some of the questions.
Great, thanks, Sherwin. And you definitely handled the other threat children from working from home. I can see that. So I'm actually surprised mine haven't come in the last 20 minutes. That might be danger. But no, thank you. It's all good information. Chris, maybe I'll turn back to you. And as we mentioned, if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. What do you do if someone answers one of those emails that you talked about, one of those phishing emails? They've responded by accident, realize it, a minute after they hit send. What are the steps that should take place at that point?
Sure. The very quick thing to say is one of the biggest things you want to encourage your users is to be able to report that securely, make sure they're comfortable with reporting it, that they're not going to get in trouble. That's the hardest thing we see, right? They click on it and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to tell anybody. I'm going to get yelled at. I'll get in trouble. We need to foster a culture where if it does happen, they get a hold of somebody in IT, their manager, whomever, immediately to let the IT know, hey, I think I clicked on this. I opened it. I didn't see what happened. At that point, IT would get involved to where they would, immediately change that user's password on that account, force them to log out if it's an Office 365. You can automatically shut down that account and disable it. And that way, automatically, you're stopping whatever has been going on. So the longer you delay in reporting that, the more there's exposure to looking at the fact that, hey, that user had access to my email. Oh, I clicked on it on Tuesday. Well, why did you wait till Friday to report it? Now they could have access to a lot of information. So the key is reporting it to your IT, making sure they understand that, and that way IT can get right in place and start stopping that and mitigating that quickly.
Jason, I know that you do a lot with Apple. Is there any differences from a security standpoint that people should be aware of, whether they're using Macs or they're on Windows based?
Yeah, there are. I mean, realistically, Apple users have historically not had the types of issues that PC users have had to face. There's tens of thousands of viruses in the wild on the PC side, and they're 70 to 80 on the Mac, but they're just as susceptible to the social engineering types of issues that we see across the board. Maybe your Mac can't be infected with a Trojan, but that doesn't mean that it can't be either a vector for PC viruses to be passed along to other machines inside the network. And it can also be, in terms of social engineering, people can still get your credit card information. They can still use the machine potentially as an inbound vector. So it's important to maintain a security posture on the Macs just as if they were as vulnerable. Windows has done a much better job of maintaining and kind of keeping that stuff down, but the Macs from a security position have never really been as easy to get into. Having said that, there is now a ransomware for the Mac that's in the wild. And a lot of people are freaking out because it's really one of the first times that that's happened on a Mac and they don't know what to do, which is why they make antivirus software for the Mac and anti-malware software. So it is really important to maintain a strong security posture, especially if your Mac is inside an industry. And again, it can be potentially a forwarding vector for other viruses and malware.
Cheryl, let me turn to you. You had a lot of good information that I know you work with businesses on. What's the process though that they take all of those details that they have to follow and actually are able to implement them so that they can comply? I'm sure that's the key challenge with all of this, that you actually disseminate the information through your entire organization.
Right. So using the checklist is very helpful. And just remembering that a lot of the processes are things that we do without realizing. Like we use our own Wi-Fi network. We just have to be mindful what we do from that step. So a lot of it we are doing when we get a laptop or computer, we already have antivirus installed as a free trial. And typically we carry it on or use it with our network provider. So a lot of things we're doing, we just have to be more, like a little bit extra on each step we're already doing. So that's what I'm finding.
And Sherwin, a lot of the things that you discussed that become issues are systematic, but also what are the types of conversations that employers should be having with their employees, especially that they are at home now? It's not as a controlled environment as it was when people were in the office.
Well, thank you, Garrett. I do, and thank you for your patience with my child. I think it is important to have conversations, and I like that you take that approach, because it's one thing to email policies and procedures and ask them to review, but I think it highlights the importance of security for your organization if you're taking the time to have conversations with employees, if you're taking the time on maybe a weekly or bi-weekly basis to send emails about recent threats, or beware of this scam that the Federal Trade Commission has been warning businesses about related to coronavirus or Black Lives Matter. Whatever the vulnerability point for the society is at the moment, that's where the hackers are going to go. The panelists mentioned what I would refer to as penetration testing a little bit, with the phishing and stuff like that. If you do that, or if you have an incident, a real incident, let's say, it's worthwhile to use that as an education point. And unfortunately, those things happen enough that also lends to the frequency that you need to generate awareness about the need to be vigilant. I would ask things like, is Alexa listening? If you're on a company phone call, is Alexa a confidential client phone call? And is that part of, have you as an employer thought about whether or not those listening devices should be turned off as part of your acceptable use policy if they're working from home? Do you want to forbid them from transferring personal information from their work email to their home email? Do you need to provide a device for them at home that's secure, or provide the secure web portal that they can access without being able to download information to their personal device? Those are the kinds of things you want to think about and have conversations with them about.
Great, and we're getting close to the top of the hour. Let me ask one more question, and I'll also give you guys the opportunity to kind of give a final closing thought. Chris, I'll come back to you. We're on Zoom. There was a lot in the news early in the pandemic about security breaches with people using Zoom. We know there's lots of different platforms for people to be able to do video conferencing. Zoom has done a lot to improve their security features. But what should people be aware of when it comes to these different video conferencing apps that are out there? And also any last thoughts that you have on the topics overall?
Sure. I won't necessarily endorse any specific product. I mean, there's a lot out there, right? The two biggest ones are Zoom and Microsoft Teams, I think that everybody's familiar with. And I will say right up front that in the beginning of April, in the first couple days, Zoom quickly jumped on a lot of these issues to address their vulnerabilities, and there was a lot of security concerns that were open and could be exploited. They've since addressed that. Zoom is a lot more secure, and they've stayed on top of it. But I guess just best practices when using these is remember where you are. All right, now that we're in phase 2 and things are starting to open, People are tired of being inside their house. They want to get out and go somewhere. They're sitting out on a patio. You know, you're on a Zoom meeting. You may not think much of it, but you're talking about maybe some topic that is very sensitive. Could be about client information, could be protected health information. So understand that be very careful and who's around you, what your environment is. And again, I can't help but also say, you know, if you're not on there, make sure you mute yourself. I think we've seen enough videos of issues happening where people are doing things in the background that kind of expose them to others. I think I had said to Garrett yesterday that I didn't think much of it until it occurred, but I'm having work done in my house. So I have contractors in here, and I have to be careful that maybe even talking about some of the breach investigations we're on, I may not think much of it. I'm talking here, but the person in the other room is now listening to this. So just be cognizant of where you are, what you have for environment-wise, and what information you're sharing, because you can also record these sessions. So, you know, want to be careful what you say and what you divulge, especially if it's recorded, because now it's on there and they can come back with that.
Great, thanks, Chris, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Jason, any thoughts on that and closing thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Chris 100%. You really need to be cognizant of your surroundings. You don't know necessarily what's going to happen or who's potentially listening. So it is a really important point. I like Sherwin's point about Alexa. That is really, really important. A lot of people kind of forget that she's always listening. Apple has Siri that's built into all of their devices, and you know that's also potentially listening. They've done a lot with their security posture and notifications about what they record and what they don't. You can opt in or out of those types of situations, but just be aware of what's in your environment. I would want to just reiterate the fact that making sure that your hardware is up to date, fully patched, is going to go a long way to making sure that your equipment is going to be as robust as possible, and making sure that your employees are as well trained as they can be, and test that training. You know, that's some of the best advice I can give. So
great, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And Cheryl, some closing thoughts from you.
So I would just say to go through, make your own template, go through the what ifs, what could, worst case scenario, like the horror that I kind of provided earlier with if someone walks in and tells you give up all your computers, what could you have done to prevent that? Think that way, you know, and basically check, and double check everything. And I'd have a third party come in and see, you know, things that maybe you don't see because everything's been fine. So he'll assess it better for you to see where you're lacking.
Good advice. Thank you. And Sherwin will give you the last word.
Thanks. I never want to leave a panel like this talking about cybersecurity without mentioning, again, the importance of patching. And that's not a legal issue, although it could become one, because, you know, that's what happened with Equifax and so many others. They're just failure to patch known vulnerabilities over that were known for a long period of time. And so I see remote working as a challenge for that. And I know the experts here on the panel could suggest, you know, tools that you can use to manage your patching when your employee is not behind your doors and is connecting to your network from, you know, remotely. Just making sure their devices are regularly updated and patched. So really, that's the low-hanging fruit for hackers and the easy entry point for them. And the last thing I would say is awareness is really a cultural thing, and we touched on it with the idea of creating a conversation. And the other panelists have used the word test on multiple occasions, and I really recommend that you sit down and think through and test your policies, your incident response plan. So, you know, Cheryl mentioned what sounds like a ransomware attack. You know, what would happen if somebody gets a message on their screen and our files are being encrypted? What do we do? look, you go to your response plan, your incident response plan, and is it working for us? And you'll see right away what will happen, that you have gaps in your plan and you don't have assignments for people to act quickly. So really sitting down and doing, even virtually, you can do this. I've done this with clients and even in other parts of the world, whose enterprise is scattered, sit down and go through what they call a tabletop exercise, where you imagine a scenario. Everyone gets the scenario maybe ahead of time and you work through it, or you surprise them with the scenario on the call, and you test the team's knowledge about who does what and when, and in what order. And that will help you with your backup plans and your recovery and restoring from backup, like was mentioned at the beginning, I think, by Jason.
Great, well, thank you. And I want to again thank all of our panelists. Before we turn off, I want to welcome Glenn McDermott, who is the chair of our Technology Council. Glenn is the founder, owner of Red Rock Branding. And Glenn, thanks for helping put this together today.
Thank you, Garrett, for, as always, running a smooth show. Jason and Chris and Cheryl for really good multiple inputs. And I love hearing the different perspectives. And I just want to add one at the end. At Red Rock Branding, we have been remote for nearly 10 years, and we have been able to train, recruit, and retain a really diverse workforce as a result of it. So I just wanted to kind of wrap it up at the end by saying that remote working has some tremendous benefits for everyone in the organization. And I think this is kind of basically the biggest revolution in the workplace that anyone's ever seen. And at the Technology Council, we try and educate and inform the chamber constituents as to how to manage and work best through this. So we are happy to hear from you if you want to come join us on the steering committee or any other topics that you want to hear about today. But I'm very thankful for everyone on the call today, and I'll steer it back to Garrett. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Glenn. And yes, our Technology Council presented by Comcast Business, lots of opportunities to get involved, and they've been providing a lot of great content like today, information that people can use in their businesses. If you want to watch this or you want to pass this webinar on to a friend, we'll have it loaded onto our YouTube page in the next day or so. All of our webinars are kept there. Again, want to thank our panelists, thank everyone who joined us today, and hope you have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.